What would you do if a police officer stopped the one doctor who was racing against time to save a stranger's life, but before the officer could finish asking questions, the hospital's CEO pulled up and called him by name? Most people think they can tell who someone is with a single glance. But on one rainy morning, one wrong assumption nearly changed more than one life. Stay with this story, because what happens next is something no one on that street could have predicted. The morning rush hour had already filled the roads. Cars moved slowly through the busy city, and dark clouds covered the sky. A light rain began to fall, making the streets shine under the traffic lights. Drivers hurried to work, parents rushed their children to school, and ambulances could occasionally be heard in the distance. Driving through the traffic was a quiet man named Dr. Marcus Bennett. He wasn't driving a luxury car. His old silver sedan had a few scratches on the doors and looked like thousands of other cars on the road. He wore a simple gray jacket over blue medical scrubs, almost completely hidden from view. His hospital ID badge rested inside his pocket where no one could see it. Marcus kept both hands on the steering wheel. His eyes moved between the road and a digital clock on the dashboard. 8:17 a.m. He quietly took a deep breath. "Please hold on," he whispered to himself. His phone buzzed through the car speakers. The screen displayed only one word. Hospital. Marcus pressed the answer button. A calm but worried voice spoke. "Dr. Bennett, the patient has arrived." Marcus remained calm. "I'm about 10 minutes away. The surgical team is ready. Tell everyone to stay prepared. I'll be there as fast as traffic allows. We're counting on you." "I know." The call ended. Marcus looked at the clock again. Every minute mattered. Not because someone important was waiting for him, but because somewhere inside Riverside Medical Center, a patient was depending on him to arrive before it was too late. Just as Marcus turned onto a wide boulevard lined with expensive homes, flashing red and blue lights suddenly appeared in his rearview mirror. He looked into the mirror. A police cruiser. Marcus calmly switched on his signal. He slowly pulled to the side of the road. The rain became heavier. People in nearby cars slowed down to watch. Officer Ryan Collins stepped out of the patrol car and walked toward the driver's window with a serious expression. One look at Marcus, his older sedan, and the neighborhood around them seemed enough for the officer to make up his mind. Marcus rolled down the window. "Good morning, officer." There was no fear in his voice. Only respect. Officer Collins didn't return the greeting. "License and registration." Marcus immediately reached for his wallet. "Of course." As he handed over the documents, the officer looked inside the car. Old coffee cup. Medical bag on the back seat. Several thick books. Nothing unusual. Yet the officer continued staring. "You in a hurry?" Marcus answered honestly. "Yes, sir." "Where are you going?" "To work." "What kind of work?" Marcus smiled politely. "I work at the hospital." The officer looked unconvinced. "What hospital?" Before Marcus could answer, his phone rang again. This time. The caller ID simply read, "Emergency Operating Room." Marcus glanced at the screen for only a second. Then looked back at Officer Collins. The officer noticed the caller's name. And suddenly his expression became even more suspicious. He had no idea that delaying this quiet driver by even a few more minutes could put an entire operating room on hold. Officer Collins looked at the phone screen for a brief moment. Emergency operating room. He slowly looked back at Marcus. "Go ahead," Marcus said politely. "It's the hospital." Instead of nodding, the officer folded his arms. "You can answer after we're finished." Marcus didn't argue. He simply pressed the side button, silencing the call. "Yes, officer." The calm answer only seemed to make Collins more suspicious. He took Marcus's driver's license and registration back to his patrol car. Marcus remained inside his sedan. His fingers rested lightly on the steering wheel. His eyes moved to the dashboard clock. 8:20 a.m. 3 minutes had already passed. Inside Riverside Medical Center, every passing minute mattered. Back in the patrol car, Officer Collins carefully examined Marcus's information. Everything matched. The license was valid. The registration was current. The insurance was active. Nothing appeared unusual. Yet something still didn't feel right to him. He requested another computer check. No warrants. No violations. No alerts. His partner's voice came over the radio. Everything clear. Collins answered quietly. So far. He looked once more at Marcus's older sedan. Then at the address on the license. Then back at the hospital listed on the emergency caller ID. Something didn't seem to fit the picture he had created in his mind. Outside, the rain became heavier. Water rolled down the windshield. Marcus quietly watched the entrance to the nearby highway. He knew that road led directly to the hospital. If he could leave now, he could still make it. His phone rang again. This time it didn't stop after a few seconds. The screen continued glowing. Operating room coordinator. Marcus looked toward the officer. He didn't answer. He simply waited. After nearly 30 seconds, the call ended. Only a second later. A new message appeared. Patient is ready. Waiting for you. Marcus slowly locked the screen. His face remained calm. But he quietly took another deep breath. Officer Collins returned to the driver's window. You said you work at the hospital. Yes, sir. What exactly do you do there? Marcus answered without hesitation. I'm a doctor. The officer looked at him for several seconds. A doctor? Yes. What kind of doctor? Marcus smiled politely. I'll explain everything once we're finished here. That answer wasn't enough. Officer Collins looked into the back seat again. He noticed a neatly packed black medical case. Beside it lay a folded white lab coat. The name embroidered above the pocket was hidden beneath the fold. The officer couldn't read it. He pointed toward the bag. Open it. Marcus nodded. Of course. He carefully reached into the back seat and unzipped the medical case. Inside were surgical gloves, medical reference notes, a stethoscope, and several sealed hospital folders. Nothing illegal. Nothing suspicious. Officer Collins looked disappointed. Just then. A loud siren echoed in the distance. An ambulance raced past the traffic toward Riverside Medical Center. Marcus quietly watched it disappear. He whispered almost to himself, I hope they can hold on. The officer heard those words. Who's holding on? Marcus looked back at him. A patient. Before Collins could ask another question, his police radio suddenly crackled. Unit 12, be advised. The dispatcher paused for a second. We've just received a priority notification from Riverside Medical Center. Collins picked up the radio. This is Unit 12. The dispatcher's next sentence made him look back at Marcus. Hospital administration is urgently trying to locate one of their senior doctors. Then the dispatcher spoke the name clearly. Dr. Marcus Bennett. Officer Collins lowered the police radio slowly. For the first time since the traffic stop began, he looked at Marcus with real uncertainty. Did they just say, Dr. Marcus Bennett? Marcus nodded calmly. Yes, sir. The officer studied his face. You never told me your full name. You never asked. The answer wasn't rude. It wasn't sarcastic. It was simply true. For a brief moment, neither man spoke. Then the radio crackled again. Unit 12, this is dispatch. Riverside Medical Center has confirmed that Dr. Marcus Bennett is urgently needed. Please advise if you have any information. Officer Collins picked up the microphone but hesitated. He looked at Marcus again. Something still didn't make sense. If this man was really the doctor the hospital was searching for, why was he driving an old sedan? Why wasn't he wearing a white coat? Why had he stayed so calm this entire time? Collins pressed the radio. Dispatch, I may have located the individual. A short silence followed. Then came the reply. Unit 12, Hospital Administration requests an immediate update. Before Collins could answer, Marcus's phone rang again. This time, the screen displayed a different name. Chief of Surgery. Marcus looked at the officer. May I answer now? Collins paused for a second. Then nodded. Marcus accepted the call. Dr. Bennett, a worried voice said immediately, the patient is becoming unstable. Marcus remained calm. I'm on my way. We've prepared operating room 3. Good. The entire surgical team is waiting. I'll be there as soon as I can. We can't begin without you. Marcus ended the call and quietly placed the phone back on the dashboard. Officer Collins had heard every word. His expression began to change. You really are a doctor. Marcus smiled politely. Yes, sir. Just then, another message appeared on Marcus's phone. He didn't hide it. The notification was visible from the driver's window. CEO has left the hospital. Officer Collins frowned. The CEO? Marcus glanced at the message before locking the screen. Looks like she's on her way. To where? Marcus looked through the rain-covered windshield. I'm not sure. At that exact moment, several blocks away, a black luxury SUV exited the hospital's main entrance. Its headlights cut through the heavy rain. Inside sat Evelyn Brooks, the CEO of Riverside Medical Center. She wasn't traveling alone. Beside her sat the hospital's chief of surgery. Neither of them spoke. Both stared ahead with concern. The driver pressed the accelerator. The SUV moved quickly through traffic. Back at the roadside, Officer Collins still hadn't handed Marcus's license back. He looked once more at the old sedan. Then at the quiet man behind the wheel. Everything he had assumed no longer seemed certain. Before he could make another decision, a deputy's voice suddenly came over the radio. Unit 12. We've just spotted a hospital executive convoy heading in your direction. Collins frowned. A convoy? The deputy answered, yes, and according to dispatch. He paused. They're coming for Dr. Marcus Bennett. Officer Collins slowly lowered his radio. For the first time that morning, he wasn't thinking about the traffic stop. He was thinking about the words he had just heard. A hospital executive convoy is heading your way. He looked at Marcus through the open window. Marcus remained exactly the same. Calm. Patient. His hands rested quietly on the steering wheel. Not once had he raised his voice. Not once had he demanded special treatment. The rain continued falling. Cars passed slowly, their drivers watching from a distance. Some wondered why an ordinary traffic stop had lasted so long. Marcus glanced at the dashboard clock. 8:27 a.m. Another minute had passed. He quietly closed his eyes for a second. I hope they're keeping the patient stable. Officer Collins heard him. You seem more worried about someone else than yourself. Marcus nodded. I always am. Before Collins could respond, another police unit pulled up behind the patrol car. A young deputy stepped out. Morning, Sergeant. Collins walked over to him. What have you got? The deputy held up his tablet. Dispatch confirmed everything. The hospital has been trying to reach Dr. Marcus Bennett for the last 15 minutes. Collins looked back at Marcus. The doctor in that car? Yes. The deputy lowered his voice. And apparently, today's operation can't begin until he arrives. Collins felt a knot forming in his stomach. Just then, the sound of powerful engines echoed down the street. Both officers turned. 3 black SUVs appeared at the far end of the road. Their headlights reflected off the wet pavement. They moved steadily through traffic. No flashing lights. No sirens. Yet every driver instinctively moved aside. The convoy stopped only a few meters behind Marcus's sedan. People walking along the sidewalk stopped to watch. Nearby shop owners stepped outside. Even drivers rolled down their windows. The rear door of the first SUV slowly opened. A woman wearing a dark business suit stepped out. She looked confident but deeply concerned. Without looking at anyone else, she walked straight toward Marcus's car. Officer Collins stepped into her path. Ma'am, this is an active traffic stop. She politely nodded. I understand, officer. She reached into her jacket and showed an official hospital identification card. My name is Evelyn Brooks. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Riverside Medical Center. Collins blinked. The CEO? Yes. She looked past him toward Marcus. Is Dr. Bennett all right? Marcus rolled down the window a little farther and smiled politely. I'm fine, Ms. Brooks. She let out a quiet sigh of relief. Thank goodness. We've all been worried. Officer Collins looked from Marcus to the CEO. His confusion grew even deeper. You know each other? The CEO looked genuinely surprised by the question. Of course. She smiled warmly at Marcus. Dr. Bennett leads one of our most important surgical teams. The deputy beside Collins quietly whispered, Sir. But before he could finish speaking, another vehicle suddenly pulled in behind the SUVs. This one carried several doctors and nurses still wearing hospital scrubs. The moment they stepped out, every one of them looked toward Marcus. One young nurse covered her mouth in relief. A senior surgeon hurried forward. Dr. Bennett. He called. We've been waiting for you. Then he looked at Officer Collins and said something that made the entire roadside fall silent. If Dr. Bennett doesn't reach the operating room in the next few minutes. He paused. Our patient may lose their only chance. A heavy silence settled over the roadside. Officer Collins looked from the senior surgeon to Dr. Marcus Bennett. The words echoed in his mind. Our patient may lose their only chance. For the first time that morning, he realized this traffic stop was no longer just about a driver. Someone's life might be depending on every passing minute. Collins quickly handed Marcus his driver's license. Doctor, why didn't you tell me all of this? Marcus accepted the license with a calm smile. I tried to explain that I was on my way to the hospital. You could have told me you were leading an emergency operation. Marcus gently shook his head. I've learned something during my years as a doctor. The officer looked at him. My title shouldn't decide whether someone treats me with respect. Those simple words hit everyone standing nearby. The CEO quietly smiled. That's exactly who Dr. Bennett is. She turned toward Officer Collins. For the past 12 years, he's been one of the finest doctors I've ever worked with. He never asks for special treatment. He never introduces himself by his position. He lets his work speak for him. The nurses standing nearby nodded. One young nurse smiled. My first day at Riverside, I didn't even know he was our senior trauma surgeon. Another doctor laughed softly. He still eats lunch with the interns. He remembers every nurse's name. And he always stays after his shift if another patient needs help. Marcus looked slightly embarrassed. Everyone on our team works hard. The CEO smiled. That's exactly why they trust you. Officer Collins lowered his eyes. Everything he had assumed was falling apart. He had looked at an old car. Simple clothes. A quiet man. And he had created a story that wasn't true. Just then, Marcus's pager suddenly began beeping. The sharp sound broke the silence. Every member of the medical team immediately looked at him. Marcus checked the screen. His expression became serious. The chief of surgery stepped closer. What is it? Marcus quietly answered. The patient's condition has changed. The chief's face tightened. Can they wait? Marcus looked at the message again. They're trying. But not for long. The CEO immediately turned toward Officer Collins. We need to leave now. Before Collins could answer, he noticed something on the dashboard inside Marcus's car. A framed photograph. It showed Marcus standing with a group of doctors wearing blue surgical gowns. In the center stood a smiling little girl holding a teddy bear. Across the bottom of the frame were the words, "Thank you for giving me another birthday." Officer Collins stared at the picture. Who's the little girl? Marcus smiled warmly. Her name is Emily. She was my first successful heart transplant patient. The officer looked back at Marcus. Do you keep that picture with you every day? Marcus nodded. It reminds me why every minute matters. The roadside became silent once again. Officer Collins took one slow breath. Then, without saying another word, he stepped back from the car and motioned for traffic to stop. He was about to clear the road himself. But before Marcus could start the engine, another black SUV pulled up behind the hospital convoy. The vehicle carried government plates. The rear door opened. A distinguished man in a dark suit stepped out. The CEO looked genuinely surprised. She quietly whispered, I wasn't expecting him. Everyone turned to look. The man walked straight toward Marcus. And the moment he reached the driver's window, he smiled and said, "Dr. Bennett. I'm glad I found you before the surgery begins." No one on that roadside had any idea who the man was. Or why even the hospital's CEO suddenly stood aside to let him pass. The man in the dark suit walked calmly through the rain. No one spoke. Even the doctor stepped aside without being asked. He stopped beside Dr. Marcus Bennett's car and smiled warmly. "Dr. Bennett," he said, extending his hand, "I'm relieved we found you." Marcus shook his hand. "It's good to see you again." Officer Collins looked from Marcus to the stranger. "Sir, may I ask who you are?" Before the man could answer, CEO Evelyn Brooks smiled. "Officer, this is Mr. Richard Lawson, the chairman of Riverside Medical Center's board of directors." Collins felt his heart sink. The chairman? He hadn't expected the hospital's CEO to arrive. Now the chairman himself was standing on the side of the road. Richard Lawson looked toward Marcus. "I heard there was a delay." Marcus smiled politely. "Just a misunderstanding." The chairman nodded. "I appreciate your patience." Then he turned toward Officer Collins. "I understand you're doing your job." His voice remained calm. "But today, every minute is extremely important." Officer Collins lowered his head. "I understand that now." Marcus immediately spoke before anyone could say more. "The officer has been respectful." Collins looked up in surprise. Marcus wasn't trying to embarrass him. He wasn't blaming him. He was protecting his dignity. The CEO noticed it too. She smiled quietly. "This is exactly why everyone at the hospital respects Dr. Bennett." One of the younger nurses nodded. "He never points fingers. He always looks for solutions." The chairman laughed softly. "I've known Marcus for almost 15 years. He looked at the small crowd gathering nearby. And I've never once heard him ask for special treatment." The reporters quickly began writing notes. One of them stepped forward. "Mr. Lawson, is Dr. Bennett really that important to Riverside?" The chairman smiled. "You could replace a building. You could replace equipment. You could even replace me one day." He paused. "But finding another doctor like Marcus Bennett." He slowly shook his head. "Isn't easy." Marcus looked slightly uncomfortable. "I've never worked alone." He turned toward the medical team. "Every successful surgery depends on every person standing here." The nurses smiled. The surgeons nodded. The CEO looked proud. "That's another reason he's our leader." Just then, Marcus's pager sounded again. This time, the tone was different. Every doctor immediately recognized it. The chief of surgery quickly stepped closer. "Marcus. What does it say?" Marcus looked down at the screen. His calm expression became serious. "The patient has gone into critical condition." The medical team exchanged worried looks. Without hesitation, Officer Collins stepped into the middle of the road. He activated his emergency lights. Then he turned toward Marcus. "Doctor. I'm going to personally escort you to the hospital." Marcus smiled. "Thank you, officer." Traffic immediately began clearing. The police cruiser moved into position. The hospital SUVs lined up behind Marcus's car. Just as everyone prepared to leave, Marcus's phone rang once more. The screen displayed a private secure number. Marcus answered. "Hello." For several seconds, he listened without speaking. Then his expression changed completely. Even the CEO noticed. "What happened?" she asked. Marcus slowly lowered the phone. He looked at the chairman. Then at the chief of surgery. Finally, he spoke 4 quiet words that made every doctor freeze. "It's not one patient." A long silence followed. Marcus took a slow breath. "There are 2. And suddenly, everyone realized the emergency was far more complicated than anyone had imagined. The words hung in the air. "It's not one patient. There are 2. For a moment, no one moved. The rain continued falling, but every doctor standing beside the road seemed frozen. Officer Collins looked at Marcus. 2 emergency patients?" Marcus slowly nodded. "Yes." The chief of surgery stepped forward. "Both are coming here." Marcus looked at his phone again. No. He took a slow breath. One patient is already in operating room 3. The second patient is arriving by helicopter. A quiet silence spread through the medical team. The CEO looked toward the chairman. Can both surgeries happen at the same time? The chief of surgery answered first. Not without Marcus. Officer Collins frowned. What do you mean? The chief explained calmly. Dr. Bennett is the only surgeon certified to lead both specialist teams. He has spent years training for situations exactly like this. Collins slowly looked back at Marcus. The quiet man sitting in the old sedan carried responsibilities far greater than anyone outside the hospital could imagine. Marcus glanced at the time. 8:31 a.m. He quietly closed his eyes for a brief second. Every minute mattered. Every decision mattered. Every delay mattered. The chairman placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. We'll handle everything at the hospital. Marcus nodded. I know. Just then, the helicopter's distant sound echoed across the city. Everyone instinctively looked toward the cloudy sky. The chief of surgery checked his phone. The second patient has landed. A young nurse hurried toward Marcus. Doctor. She hesitated. The family is asking if you've arrived. Marcus gave her a reassuring smile. Tell them we're on our way. They're frightened. Marcus nodded gently. I understand. Tell them not to lose hope. The nurse quickly made the call. Officer Collins quietly watched everything happening around him. No panic. No shouting. No blame. Only professionals working together under pressure. He stepped beside Marcus's window. Doctor. Marcus looked at him. I'm truly sorry for delaying you. Marcus smiled kindly. You didn't know. I should have asked more questions. You were trying to do your job. Collins shook his head. I judged you before I knew who you were. Marcus answered softly. We've all made quick decisions at some point. The officer lowered his eyes. I'll remember this day for the rest of my career. Marcus simply smiled. Before anyone could leave, the chairman's phone suddenly rang. He answered immediately. His expression changed. He slowly looked toward Marcus. The donor family has just arrived. The CEO looked surprised. They came themselves? Yes. The chairman nodded. They've made one special request. Marcus frowned slightly. What request? The chairman took a slow breath. They refuse to let the surgery begin. He paused as everyone waited. Until they speak with you personally. Every doctor exchanged confused looks. The donor family had never met Marcus before. So why would they insist on seeing him first? Even Marcus looked genuinely surprised. For the first time that morning. He had no idea what was waiting for him at the hospital. And whatever the family wanted to say. It was important enough to delay one of the most critical surgeries of the day. Marcus looked at the chief of surgery for only a second. Then he carefully placed the unopened envelope into the inside pocket of his jacket. I'll read it later, he said quietly. Right now, the patients come first. The grandfather smiled with pride. I knew you'd say that. Marcus shook each family member's hand. Thank you for trusting us. The young woman smiled through her tears. 8 years ago, you gave me my future. She looked toward the operating rooms. Now. Please go give someone else theirs. Marcus nodded once before quickly walking down the hallway. Doctors and nurses immediately fell into step beside him. No one needed instructions. Everyone already knew their role. As they reached the surgical wing, the chief of surgery spoke. We've stabilized the first patient. Marcus nodded. And the second? The condition is becoming more complicated. Marcus stopped outside the operating room doors. He looked through the large glass window. Inside, the entire surgical team was already waiting. Every instrument had been prepared. Every monitor was running. Every person in the room turned toward him the moment he arrived. Not because he was famous. But because they trusted him. Marcus quietly put on his surgical cap. Then his mask. The room became completely silent. Before entering, he looked at the team. We're here for one reason. To give both patients every possible chance. The doctors nodded together. "We're ready." At that very moment, Officer Collins quietly entered the hospital lobby. He had driven straight from the traffic stop. The CEO noticed him. "Officer?" He looked uncomfortable. "I wanted to know if the patients are all right." She smiled kindly. "They have the best team possible." Collins looked through the hallway window and saw Marcus calmly leading everyone inside. For the first time that morning, he truly understood what leadership looked like. Not loud. Not proud. Just steady when everyone else needed hope. Suddenly, every monitor inside the operating room sounded at once. One of the nurses looked toward Marcus. "Doctor. The second patient's heartbeat is dropping." The room froze for a split second. Marcus stepped forward without hesitation. Then he gave one calm instruction that instantly set the entire surgical team into motion. And outside the operating room, everyone could only wait and hope that it wasn't already too late. Hours later, the doors of the operating room finally opened. Marcus slowly removed his surgical mask. He looked tired, but he was smiling. "The surgeries were successful," he said quietly. The waiting families burst into tears of relief and hugged one another. The CEO shook Marcus's hand, while Officer Collins stepped forward with deep respect. "I'm sorry for judging you before I knew who you were," he said. Marcus smiled kindly. "The greatest titles aren't written on a badge or a business card. They're earned by the way we treat people." Officer Collins nodded, knowing he would never forget that lesson. What would you have done if you had witnessed this traffic stop? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this hidden identity story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Our next story features another unbelievable hidden identity reveal that you won't see coming.